Trix Vivier, thank you so much for joining on the stream today. It's lovely to have you here. So before I hand over to you for a quick introduction, I know last year was a big year for you, landing a role on the Mnet series Trackers, and then this year landing an even bigger role on Legacy and uprooting your life basically from Cape Town to Joburg for this new role. Tell us a bit about it.
About the uprooting or the role? They kind of do go hand in hand because the one couldn't have happened without the other. And I suppose the travel restrictions and the boundaries that we were living under during COVID, really added to me ending up in Johannesburg and portraying this role, because if I was still living in Cape Town and this role came up, the fact that I had to move cities would have definitely played a part in my commitment to this job. I would have opted for perhaps an ARC or a day player that I could fly up and down. But I think, COVID happened and it was either relocate or possibly lose out on the job. And it came at a very interesting time, both personally and professionally, because I've always been a freelancer. I've always done short form television, if you will, or feature films, short films, theatre productions. So it's always been a case of you enter the contract, you do the job. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. You conclude it, goes into post-production, and you move on to hopefully your next job or to multiple auditions. But in this case, it was a situation where I was signing on to a year contract, and that brought both scary factors, but also very exciting factors, because as many people found themselves out of work after COVID happened. So financially, it came at a very good time for me. And as I think a lot of people did during COVID, a lot of people had time to kind of really assess their professional lives, their personal lives, and really, kind of take a vergrootglas, a magnifying glass, and really look at the way that you've handled yourself in your professional career. And I did that over a couple of weeks, because I got the first phone call for Legacy in January already, so I had a lot of time to really consider what the implications would be of me relocating. But the fact that I had time and space to put my career under that magnifying glass really gave me insight and motivated me to take the plunge and to pack up my things. And for my husband and I and our 2 dogs to relocate, to go on this new journey. So I don't know if I've answered your question. I think I've kind of exceeded the word count here, but it was really a culmination of elements that led me to where I am today. And I think if it happened under different circumstances pre-COVID, I'm not sure, if this would have been the outcome. I think I would have been more skeptical. I would have analyzed more things, but COVID made me take the plunge, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, it's a lot that's happened in such a short space of time, but also obviously being an actor, it's really tough to land big roles. And I know last year, like I said, was a big year for you. So when an opportunity like this comes about, obviously a lot of thought goes into it. But that actually brings me to my next question. In terms of the world of acting, was it always something that you could sustain full time, or did you have to sort of juggle a couple of things along the side, like that American sort of story of being every waitress is an actor? What was your sort of background leading up to this position that you're in now?
Well, it feels like 100 years ago, because I realized actually just before I hopped onto this call with you that when I started out, it was the year 2009, and I wasn't even on Facebook. So in terms of the way that you approached your career back then, today it looks very different. So I went into the industry without any, I did not have a manual. I obviously had very little experience, and I had no idea how anything worked. No idea. And so I kind of approached it by what I saw people around me that had graduated from the Waterfront Theatre School, what they were doing, and I thought, well, that is how it's done. And so my plunge into the industry was really trial and error, and I never said no to anything. So whatever I could do, whatever ability I had, and I'll elaborate on that now, but whatever I could do to earn money, I did. And that included, I was a magician's assistant. Not that I had that talent before I started, but I learned on the job. I don't know if anybody's born with knowing how to disappear in a box with, 100 swords going through your body. But I did that. I taught, I was a qualified ballet and modern teacher, so I taught classes. I did work in a bar and I waited. I did a lot of like small children's theatre productions where you literally have a combi, like a minivan as your little dressing room, and you drive from school to school and you play 6 different characters, and you have a sort of a room divider set up. And, not all of the schools had stages or halls. So, we did a tour in Soweto, for example, and sometimes we were just on a piece of ground on the sand under a tree, and that was your stage. So to answer your question, I never really, in fact, I only got my first TV job, so 9, 10, 11, 12, 5 years after I started. So it took me 5 years to actually get work in the genre that I really wanted to work in. That's just how it happened for me. So I sustained myself by doing a lot of dancing work because I was a professional dancer for a long time. I did the whole Sun City Showgirl thing. I danced in clubs, not like dodgy, but but yeah. Anyway, but I really did all of it, and I could pay my rent with that whilst I was auditioning. And it took me 5 years to get my first TV job, and then after that, it took me another 3 years to get my first lead, sort of a prominent role where people, for the first time, really sat up and said, "Oh wow, who's this? Oh, she can really kind of act." So it was a long road, but no, I never did just one thing. It's only been, I think, 4 years now that I've been able to sustain just from acting. But yeah. That
is something that I really, really admire about you and people within your field, because it sounds like fun, but obviously it never is at the time when you like struggling and you worried about paying rent and you juggling all these different jobs. But at the same time, it also feels like you've really lived, you've experienced so many things. It's character building. Like by the time in your 60s or 70s, you're gonna have you already do have such amazing stories to tell. So, and also I'm sure that all helps within your field of acting, like different roles and the character building that you did throughout these roles. So you obviously need a lot of grit and determination to be an actor, especially in South Africa. I obviously have seen over the years that the sort of local productions and talents and everything, it's just increased, I'm pretty sure, massively since you started in 2009. What would you say really inspires you about your job to keep going? Like all those times that you faced rejection and all the tough times, you've been very determined. What has been the most fulfilling about your job?
Sure, it's really simple. It's not a complicated answer, but to answer your question, I'll start by telling a little story. The role I'm currently playing on Legacy, I'm the youngest daughter of the Potgieter family, and the art department on set had asked us to submit baby photos of us as kids, so they could edit and make family portraits as part of the art dressing in our house that we're filming. And I had one scene the other day where I had to enter the scene already very emotional, and those scenes are quite tricky because you have very little time to get to a place where you are sobbing. And on the day, I was really struggling with that because I can't remember why. But in the room that I was standing in before I entered the room where we were filming, there was a baby photo of me. I think I was 3 or 4 years old, and I was dressed up in my grandmother's dress. It was some kind of concert that we did. And I looked at, I'm probably going to get emotional now, but I looked at 4-year-old Trix in this photo, and I stood there in this room and I realized I'm looking at my younger self, and I'm able to stand here and tell her, see, I'm getting emotional, and I'm able to tell her that she realized her dreams. And that was a very, very, very profound moment for me, because I think it reminded me, firstly, how privileged I am to have had people, on the road supporting me. I had transport, I had parents who fed me, who cared for me, who inspired me. But so the answer to your question is, really, it was a young girl's dream. It's always been my dream, and I've never been able to do something else. So that's, yeah, I couldn't tell young Trix no. So here I am.
Literally giving me goosebumps. That's really such a beautiful story. And were there moments, obviously, because now I want to tell you, you've made it, but I know within acting, like, that's never the case, because after one job, it's back to the hustle, and it's not like this glorified scene that you always see in the movies, that one role comes after the next. But was there ever a moment where you really wanted to quit, and you, after sort of all these struggles of pursuing your dream, you felt that you maybe weren't reaching it quick enough? Was there a sort of pivotal moment where you almost quit, or thought, maybe this isn't my destiny?
Many times, Marisa. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I wanted to give up, because I for so long I felt like an outsider, and not because I have issues or anything. It's just simply, a person can only take so much rejection. You are physically, emotionally, mentally able to only endure so much before you get to a point where you really think, I'm clearly not meant to do this, because I'm trying so hard. I'm doing everything right according to the books and my agent, but it's just not happening. But there was one moment where, and it's also a beautiful story about grit and this ridiculous belief that I have in myself, because I wasn't always really good, but I always believed that I could do it. But before I booked one of the lead roles on a drama called Waterfront, they had the audition brief had been circling, and I was kind of what they call on the wish list for this part, but so were many other actresses. And at that point, I'd only done very little work. So I was, I wasn't a reputable actress. And I submitted tapes, and I didn't even make it, through the first round. And then I heard that they had offered it to someone else, and I was really bummed, because I was on the short list. That made me feel like I was, I had a chance. Anyway, and then this person said no. And the long story short, they offered it to someone else, and she also said no. And so I thought, maybe I'd stand a chance now. And then I had to re-audition again. And I re-auditioned, but I was, I was already in such a broken place, because I felt like I failed. And then I submitted tapes again, and then I got that part, and that was, it was something. It was like, how they say, Phoenix, what is that saying? That you have to be really, really at your lowest point. And it's when you turn around from that, when the magic happens, because you turning around, and it's not out of desperation, it's you turning around out of pure, I'm at the lowest point that I can be, so whatever I do now, there's nothing for me left to lose, and I'm just gonna go for it. And that's what happened within those audition tapes, because I was so down. I really wanted to quit, and I went to my agent's office, and we did the auditions, and I was like, I'm just going to do whatever I want. I don't care anymore. I don't care what people think anymore, because I'm clearly either embarrassing myself or I'm really bad at this. So what's the worst that can happen? And so I did this wild audition tape, and then I got the part. So
Beautiful.
yeah. Yeah, but I had a couple of times where I was rejected so many times, and I just thought, I'm never. And of course, you are paralleling yourself against this kind of narrative, this Hollywood narrative that you refer to the saying or the phrase "made it," big break, being on a wish list or a short list, and that was never really part of my journey. And because it wasn't, I always felt like I was perhaps failing or doing something wrong, or I didn't belong to this group of people that were the wanted ones, which is it's such nonsense. When I speak to younger people now starting out, I said the first thing you need to do is erase that idea of big break, erase the idea of made it, and erase your idea of success, because if you're a freelancer, there's no such thing as linear progression. There really isn't. Yeah.
Okay, so we've spoken about a lot of the sort of moments of darkness and also grit. I want to know, as an actor, because this has always fascinated me, because I often go through phases. I can be super emotional, and I don't want to see people, or I don't want to, definitely don't want to appear on camera. I'm sure everyone has those days, and this is something that I always admire of actors, models, or anyone who has to physically show up. Do you have a pep talk or a ritual or anything when Trix is just not in the mood to perform or to act? What do you actually have to mentally go through to get the courage to actually show up?
Mm. I'm going to sound like such a nerd, but when I have work, I'm I'm so fucking happy to have work that it's very seldom that I don't want to go to work. And I did have a day yesterday. I obviously can't disclose what I was shooting because the show hasn't started, but I was very scared to go to work, and I was scared to go to the places that I had to go emotionally, because it's very dark places that I have to access in order to deliver the performances that would service the storyline at that point. And again, a very simple answer. I'm really just happy to have work, and to be selected, and to have the opportunity to go to work and do what I love to do. And that sounds really cheesy, but it's the honest truth, because as we've covered before, it didn't come easy. And so I approach every second of every day with immense gratitude. Because if I do feel like, I really don't feel like working today, my other Trix, I have a twin head that, speaks to me every day, will say, how dare you? How dare you not feel like working today? Like, how dare you be such a, so I've never really felt like that. But it's, to answer the other part of your question, it takes immense, you have to be really brave to fully show up in front of the camera, because you either do it or you don't. There's no such thing as a halfway performance. I mean, you can do it, but it reads, and it won't be believable for the audience. But I do that by compartmentalizing. So I really have my private life and I have my professional life, and I know that the way I've constructed my private life, my relationship, my home life, I can afford to go to work and really show up and do whatever it is I need to do. Yesterday there was a lot of violent scenes, a lot of emotional scenes, and I know that I can do that at work, and I know that I can show up and be absolutely present and give all of myself, because I know for a fact that when I come home, I have a safe space that is protected and that nobody else knows about, and I can be the fragile Trix and the exhausted Trix and the vulnerable Trix, and I have someone who's looking after me. Again, super privileged to have that, and I've got friends I can phone. So that kind of works for me. I've set up my life in that way that I can go to work and go bonkers and do all sorts of weird stuff, but then I can come home and I can just let all of that go in a safe space where people have no preconceived ideas of or expectations of what and how I should be, and so that's how I've
created the perfect sort of balance and contrast from work. I think that's actually so important for so many people with whatever field you're in, especially during this year where so many people are faced with such stressful situations and jobs, and even everyone in the front line in the medical profession. I think what you've created for yourself, it's amazing. Yeah, it's a blessing as well. And the future for Trix, what does that look like? I can kind of answer it because I haven't interviewed anyone that's this passionate about their job yet. So it's really inspiring. So I'm sure that acting is still in the pipeline for a very long time.
Well, I'm going to be on Legacy for a while. I've signed a contract for 206 episodes. And I'm going to be there until the end of March. And depending on viewership and ratings, we'll either get renewed for a season 2, or I'll carry on to do something else. I am working on a feature film next year in March, which I'm very excited about. And then my sister and I are producing a play. Of course, it's only going to happen in a year or so when theatres open up again. And then I'm also working on a short film with her. And then I'm hoping to start directing at some point in my career. I've definitely gained a lot of interest in that, so I think that's something I really want to explore at some point. I'm just not sure. I think, as a lot of people now, I'm kind of just I'm going with what's being offered to me, and I'm making the most of every day. But it's hard to live past tomorrow. I'm kind of just aiming for the end of the day, trying to do my best and be super present and super grateful, and then I'll face whatever happens tomorrow. I think we all, it's a very uncertain time for a lot of people. COVID has really shaken us all up a lot. So I'm kind of being there for, my partner and my friends and my family. And then when I go to work, I want to be there for everybody who's getting out of bed in the morning and trying to make this project work as much as I can, because it takes a lot to film during COVID. A COVID set is a very daunting place to be. And I have immense respect for our crew, our directors and our producers for making these things happen. So that's kind of what, very topical for me at the moment.
Yes, gosh, lots happening, but also exciting things in the pipeline. So a question that I had, being a fellow 30-year-old woman, being an inspiration, not only to me, but to so many other women out there. I know you are incredibly strong, and I want to know if you've got any advice to a woman out there within their 30s who are facing sort of societal pressure of what we should have achieved by this age, or what we should have accomplished. And the reason why I'm actually bringing it up as well is it's a podcast topic that I'm going to be discussing with a lovely psychiatrist, Dr. Jay Stanbridge. And I wanted your take on it, because I really do admire your sort of whole ethos and way of living. And I'd love to know what you think, especially, I mean, you've probably heard it before a lot of times as well, is, if you're not married, it's like, when you're getting married, why don't you have kids yet? You're not established in your career. There's a lot of pressure that comes with women in your 30s, especially women. So I just wanted to know your sort of take on that and advice to anyone listening or watching.
It's very, very good question, firstly, and secondly, very interesting that you are bringing it up, because it's most certainly been very topical in a lot of conversations that I've had recently, and it was sparked by the fact that, so I turned 32 in June this year, and I'm experiencing this surge in sort of a career success, but people around me are kind of really settling down and trying to fall pregnant. And so I do, as a result of that, in many conversations, feel very out of place, because that's really not on my mind at all. And I have been questioning these elements societal elements that kind of solidifies your place in the world as a woman, in terms of getting married and, being a mom, and the fact that that's not for everybody. I've also been exploring it, especially as a white Afrikaans woman, and the nuclear family construct, and sort of the term they use is the volksmoeder, that every Afrikaans person or women is expected to become. And if you don't become that, it's quite hard to set a new standard. But my advice, the journey that I walked is really reading a lot of books and finding alternative representations of women across the board, from different cultures and different countries. But I really had to go and find alternative ways of functioning and existing as a 32-year-old woman in society, because what was available to me didn't, that jacket didn't fit me. So I had to kind of design something new, which was a very interesting journey for me to walk, both personally and professionally, and also in my marriage. So my advice is really, again, simple answer is to really question everything, have discussions about everything, because if you think about where these constructs came from, if you think about religion and politics, there are so many facts that influence the expectations and architecture of the perfect type of woman and what kind of role she should be playing in society. And it's not until we really question something as simple as getting up after dinner to start clearing the table. You know, it's a simple thing, but it's so ingrained in us to say, no, moenie julle nie ek sal.
Yeah.
And it's those kind of things at a braai, you know, women all standing out in the kitchen and the guys. So it really starts, for me, it started at home, and started reading a lot of books, finding alternative ways of existing as a woman. And I drew a lot of inspiration from a lot of feminists around me, both locally and internationally. And it's really about education, and then surrounding yourself with people who are living those alternatives. That's really important. But to always remember that if, you know, it's all about, if you question X in women, you should question X in men. That's always been like the base. That's actually a quote from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, one of my favorite writers. And then also the other thing, that everything is a choice, and you should respect everybody's choices. You know, there's no right or wrong. So if you do choose to follow a certain path that is more conventional, that's absolutely okay. But then in turn, I should be allowed to choose a completely alternative path, and that should also be okay. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it most certainly is about deconstructing. That's a very fancy word, and a lot of people are, you know, throwing that around, but it's about undoing the system that has been done, and then finding new pathways of being and of communicating and of expressing yourself, I think, and really questioning what is allowed and what is not allowed, and why not.
That's a very good point, and I think that I almost think that the youth of today have got so many more sort of examples and resources at their disposal. So like for us growing up, I still remember very clearly not having internet at home, and okay, you obviously was a couple of steps ahead. We probably did a lot more reading than I did, but that's good advice to sort of search for alternatives, and because there's a system out there that can suit anyone, or not necessarily a system. There's, you know, a support crew, and there's a lot out there that we often, as growing up, can feel so self-isolated or alone or different, or we don't belong. I think that was one big thing that I felt in an Afrikaans school, being brought up in an English family. So that's really good, like sound advice.
Yeah, it's all to do with the fact that it's okay with being other. It's okay with not feeling like you fit in the, again, let's call it a not a biodome, but a kind of a ecosystem, you know, and then creating your own one where you do feel comfortable, where you do feel like you can really be and live your authentic self. And it's hard, and it's really uncomfortable, and you know, you will lose relationships with partners and friends, but it's all about knowing that if you feel something scratching within your being, if something doesn't fit right, doesn't feel right, listen to that and then, you know, interrogate it and try and strike it out.
Iron it out.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, instead of compromising who you are and lowering your voice, because that's what a lot of people do to then fit in the, you know, the stream that's already going north or south or wherever that conventional stream is going.
And then to end off, I wanted to find out if there was a sort of your biggest takeaway from pain. And I think this is something that I always find so fascinating, because you've gone through, like you've said, a lot of tough times, and you know, had to put on your big girl panties, and you had to have been very driven. Is there a particular moment or takeaway from a challenging situation that you still hold as a very big learning in your life or a blessing?
Sure. Well, I know for certain that I've learned the most of myself and about myself in the way that I exist in the world and the things that I yearn for from failed relationships, most certainly. And then at the same time from also being alone. That looks different for everybody, but I've had quite a good combination of, you know, being alone, if I say alone, like single, but also being in a lot of crazy relationships. And that's taught me a lot about what it is that I want. What does my emotional makeup yearn for in order to feel loved, in order to feel intimacy, in order to feel that I've formed bonds with people that it's strong enough to hold me and to endure whatever life throws our way. And I think the thing that I've learned the most from pain is that instead of covering up elements about myself that make me feel uncomfortable, that I'm shy to admit, it's better to let those elements come out and breathe, and you know, look them in the face and say, well, who are you? What do you want? And what are the obstacles standing in your way? And why am I shy of saying that I feel that way? Why am I afraid of saying I want this or I react like that? I think that is what pain has taught me the most, is to really unpack the groceries out of that bag and look at them, put them on the kitchen counter and really inspect them. And then that's obviously served me very well as an actor, both as an actor but also in my personal relationships, I think. Yeah.
Amazing.
And it's, you know, it's pain is also not illuminated, but really shed light on the ebb and flow of life, really, is to accept that it's, instead of being a singular event in your life, it's going to be, it's this ingevleg in the ebb and flow of life. And life is full of dualities, and it's almost like you have to just accept that there will always be an up and that will always be followed by a down. But from the down, you know, you'll climb the mountain again, and then you'll have a beautiful view. But you can't have the one without the other. So that's really, I think, yeah. And then thirdly, I would say personal growth. Really, it always comes from discomfort and pain and suffering, which is all relative to everybody, I guess. But yeah, personal growth, and that can only serve you in everything that you do. And then eventually, and it'll pull into your own personal happiness, and the sustenance to sustain personal happiness and being content. Yeah. I don't know if I answered the question.
No, I know you've got a couple of interviews today. I feel like I can chat to you for hours about this. I feel like you need your own podcast.
You've got 20 minutes more before I jump onto the other one, so that's fine. Well, I'm enjoying this actually, because the other ones are all they're gonna be very, not corporate, but it's all, you know, press. So
yes, acting and roles and Well, this is pretty much all of the questions that I had. I had one little last one, and I do feel like I can chat to you for hours about this. I just find it fascinating. I think there's so much that you say that I can relate to and that I admire, and I think you're an incredible role model. I do believe you need your own like podcast series of your own, interviewing females. You'll be brilliant. But if what would you say, and I know this is a cliche of a question, but it's something that I questioned this year when I changed from a 13-year career into something new, is what would you say your purpose is in life?
Yeah, I think I have more than one really, but I've always been attracted to, oh, this is going to sound very broad, um, mm, to find meaning in whatever it is I do. But before that, what the thing that trumps that is to feel. Now this sounds even more esoteric. What's esoteric and ethereal, I think, or I said, what is esoteric in English? I don't know. But to feel, Marisa, a journalist asked me the other day, why is it that I act? And I didn't have a solid answer for her, but what I did have was the story of the way that I felt the first time I danced on stage. And I have never ever felt so alive and so connected with every single, again, it might sound airy-fairy, but connected to every single fiber of my being, my energy, the blood flowing through my veins. And that's because when I act, when I perform, I feel. And I think my worst fear ever is to be completely disconnected from things that are happening around me. And I have a fear of isolation and not being connected, but not, not this.
Yes. Connected within your
Not the Wi-Fi, but I would say that I and to love and to understand and to listen and to, yeah, there's really a bigger energy in this world, and I think I'm on a constant quest to find a connection to that bigger energy. And at the moment, it's through my work. It might take another shape at some point in my life, maybe perhaps when I become a parent, or but it's to be connected and to feel fully. Again, very vast, broad answer, but yeah.
No, I love that. I actually also, during everything that happened this year, and when I got so consumed with work and wrapped up in this bubble of like grinding so hard, one of the first things that I actually turned to Rocco and said was like, I feel like I'm not feeling. I feel I'm like, chasing. I'm not in my body. I'm not feeling emotions. I'm bland. And it's a horrible space to be in. So I can completely understand what you're saying, and that passion. And when you do feel it, it's such you just want to hold on to it and make sure that the rest of your life you can tap into it. But as life likes to throw different challenges towards us, we can't always, we have to experience all the darkness as well. But
it's really that, like, connecting these two spaces, it's really connecting your heart and your mind. And because we are so easily influenced by, social media and industry of, look at what that one is doing, or I should be doing this, or what I'm doing this, why am I not feeling, if I'm doing A, why am I not feeling B? Because the book said, or the news said, or the Instagram said, if I do A, I'll feel B. And that's very seldomly so. So I think it's tapping into a different space to kind of, as a resource of how to feel and how to respond, instead of, thinking if I do one thing, it's going to have a certain kind of result emotionally.
Oh, Trix, thanks so much for your time and sharing, being vulnerable, but as I said, being an inspiration. I really, really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm very grateful that you had time to chat with me today.
No, thanks for having me. I mean, we've been trying to do this for such a long time, but it's just been so crazy, and I'm happy that we did this now, because I think once the show launches, it's going to be a bit mad as well. You know, everybody wants a piece of you. So yeah, no, it's been lovely. Thank you so much. In the next 5 minutes, we'll probably switch over to being more informal.
Fine. But all the best with the show, and I can't wait to watch the first episode.
Thank you. Thanks, Marisa.